Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze of the Conscious Resistance Network, and tonight we're going to talk about Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz, Norway's princess, and of course Jeffrey Epstein. If you can hear me okay, let me know, give me a comment, a thumbs up, something like that. I've shared this out through some of my social media, and I hope you are tuned in, watching live. If not, watching this later. Hope you're having a good evening. I want to first make sure that you can hear me okay. And then once we can confirm that, I want to remind you guys to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com, which is your place to get caught up with all of the content that I share via this channel, wherever you're listening from, whether you're watching on YouTube or BitChute or Minds.com or Facebook or Steemit, what have you. Bookmark theconsciousresistance.com, because this is the way that I keep up all my work and make sure that, I have a home that's not just based on social media, because those social media companies aren't always showing you the truth. They are working, in fact, against you in many cases and keeping you in a bubble, in a little loop. So if you want to make sure you don't get sucked into a loop and that you know what's going on in my world and you can keep up with my work, then you're going to want to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com. I also, again, want to remind you guys you can scroll down here and subscribe via minds.com, Steemit. You can join our Discord channel where we have a lot of activity going on at the moment. And you can also follow on the aforementioned BitChute if you want to support, if you feel so inclined to support my efforts and go the extra mile. Well, you can do so via patreon.com/Derrick Broze or Subscribestar, things of that sort. So let me know, guys, if you're interested in all that goodness. You can check it out. And anything else before we get into this? Yeah. We're not running a crowdfunding campaign. It's the last month of the year. If anybody wants to make sure that you support my work, you're going to want to sign up on Patreon or Subscribestar, because at the end of this month, throughout this month, I'll be releasing my new documentary, The 5G Trojan Horse, and we'll also be releasing my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. But let's get right into it. Jeffrey Epstein is the man of the hour, so to speak. Unfortunately, we're still talking about Jeffrey Epstein. And this is kind of a 3-4-parter story. We're going to actually start with some other stories before we get into this. But the main focus is this article coming from the New York Times, which is actually pretty good. But given what we know about the history of the New York Times and their use as propaganda, particularly as part of the CIA's disinformation and misinformation program in the past that, of course, was exposed during the Church hearings, it's kind of hard to know whether or not this story that's being put out there related to Jeffrey Epstein is correct. But before we get to that, let's check out some Prince Andrew news. Prince Andrew responds to Virginia Giuffre's Panorama interview. So Virginia Roberts Giuffre, she's been one of the most consistent Epstein accusers, as well as accusing Prince Andrew. She's the one that when she's 17, or at least 17 in this picture, Prince Andrew has his arm around her, and Ghislaine Maxwell is in there as well. You guys may have seen that picture. She's been involved in many of the court cases suing Epstein and trying to go after Prince Andrew. She gave because she lives in Australia, she gave a 60 Minutes Australia interview recently, a really good interview. You can check that out on YouTube or wherever else you want to watch it. But she also did an interview with Panorama, which is like British TV, and that came out yesterday, Sunday. And in this interview, she pretty bluntly calls out Prince Andrew and says that he's full of shit on his denial. I think you guys have already know that a couple weeks ago he did a BBC interview, and everybody pretty much universally said it was horrible and that he looked nervous. And his excuse for why he says what Virginia Giuffre is wrong is, well, for example, she said whenever she had sex with him or was forced to have sex with him, he was extremely sweaty and sweating all over the place, and she called him a horrible dancer and all these kinds of things. And he said, oh, no, because of my experience in the war, I had some condition where my sweat glands didn't work, and all kinds of weird stuff came out of that interview. And you can see right here, I'm calling BS on this because that's what it is. Prince Andrew says he has no recollection of meeting Virginia Giuffre, nor any photo being taken with her, and he emphatically denies any form of sexual conduct or relationship with her. But she pretty explicitly calls him out, and she also is calling on the people of the UK, saying, like, I need you to step up and to investigate him. Please don't let him get away with this. There was some pretty strong language that she used, just asking the British public, the UK public, to do something about it. We'll talk about more about Prince Andrew in just a moment. You can see this one though. Another princess involved, Norway's crown princess, is coming out apologizing, saying that she regrets her ties to Epstein. These ties with Epstein from Mette-Marit, the Norway crown princess, she was connected with him after the initial arrests in 2005, the whole 2008 situation. She was hanging out with him in 2013, and she said, "I would have never have had to do anything with Epstein if I had been aware of the seriousness of his criminal acts. I should have examined his past more closely, and I regret that I did not." So another person outed from positions of power being connected to Epstein, and who knows? Maybe these people are genuine. Maybe she got introduced. She says she gets introduced to him at some random party. Then the Crown Prince Haakon met Epstein on the street while they were on holiday in St. Bart's in 2012. Then Crown Prince Haakon greeted Epstein for the first and only time. Then they started to connect, and on and on and on there. But I mean, come on. It doesn't take that much research or understanding to know what the hell Epstein was up to. And I guarantee you these people knew what was up because they were, I'm not going to accuse her of being involved in it, but the people hanging out with Epstein, they're not ignorant. They know what the hell's going on, all right? So don't let them fool you. Now, more news related to Virginia Giuffre and Alan Dershowitz and ongoing lawsuits. Now, I told you guys that there's so many lawsuits associated with Epstein. Last year and earlier in this year, I went to one of the Epstein trials. Actually, it was December 4th. It was, a year ago, last year, and I interviewed Bradley Edwards. I interviewed Wayne Madsen at one of the trials related to some of the victims suing Epstein. But this is another case related to Alan Dershowitz, where Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard attorney who has been accused by Virginia Giuffre again, as well as she's accused Prince Andrew, same woman. She's accused Prince Andrew, Epstein, and also Dershowitz of forcing them to have sex with her via Epstein. And Dershowitz has long been, and there's been lawsuits going back and forth where they're suing each other for defamation. Let's just keep it short without getting too lost in the story. But in this new piece of the puzzle, Dershowitz, he has a new book called Guilt by Association, where he basically is pushing back and he's accusing Virginia Giuffre of being a liar. So now that's probably going to end up in another defamation lawsuit. Virginia Giuffre's attorney Charles Cooper asked the judge for permission to file new charges Monday during a hearing to chart the course of discovery in New York litigation. A prominent lawyer who represented Epstein before the sex offender's prison cell death in August, Dershowitz has seen his reputation in the legal community increasingly strained as multiple accusers have tied him to his client's sex trafficking ring. Giuffre is also considering allegations under the Child Victims Sex Act, a New York law that took effect in August, extending the statute of limitations for childhood sexual abuse. But Dershowitz's attorney, Howard Cooper, says there's irrefutable proof that she wasn't a child and doesn't qualify. The legal team of Virginia Giuffre, the Epstein accuser, Dershowitz accuser, is seeking evidence of Dershowitz's other sexual partners, and the judge is basically like, you don't really need to know if he's having sex with other people. And they said they're not trying to learn all about his sexual partners. They're trying to see if he had sex with anyone associated with Epstein, because he made a very public statement saying, I've never had sex with anybody other than my wife. However, Virginia Giuffre and another Epstein accuser, Sarah Ransom, a British accuser, have alleged that Dershowitz had sex with them as part of the sex trafficking operation Epstein was indicted over. Cooper noted that a third accuser, Epstein's former employee Maria Farmer, filed an affidavit also supporting Virginia Giuffre's account by claiming to have witnessed Dershowitz in the convicted pedophile's mansion with underage girls. So while Alan Dershowitz claims that it's just Virginia Giuffre and her attorney David Boies, who is a very complicated figure, who's going to figure into this New York Times story that we're about to go into in just a second. But Dershowitz has always said David Boies is just trying to get rich off me and extort me, and Virginia Giuffre lied. She said that she never had sex with me. Now she's saying she did. So he's just accused her of being a liar for quite a while now. And you can see, though, it's not just her. There's Sarah Ransom as well as Maria Farmer coming out and accusing Dershowitz. So it's at least 3 women accusing Dershowitz. And Farmer said in an April document filed with Giuffre's lawsuit, quote, on a number of occasions I witnessed Dershowitz at the New York mansion going upstairs at the same time there were young girls under the age of 18 who were present upstairs in the house. Attorneys for both Giuffre and Dershowitz appeared interested in looking into a recent New York Times expose reporting that a man operating under the pseudonym Patrick Kessler peddled what he claimed to be surveillance footage from Epstein's apartments to attorneys secreting lucrative settlements. And that's where we get into the next part of the story here. This New New York Post is basically kind of backing up what we just saw in Courthouse News, talking about the Dershowitz case. All they're adding is specifically saying that the lawyers are asking for secret communications between Epstein and Dershowitz, and that could reveal some new information. But the big story of the day, everyone, just so you know, which brings me back to my original point, it's New York Times. Take it for what you will. This could be a purposeful disinformation. It could just be completely 100% fact, top to bottom. I'll let you guys be the deciders of that. But Jeffrey Epstein, Blackmail, and a lucrative hot list. This is just a man who is a hacker. He called himself Patrick Kessler, and he let himself get photographed, this clearly, which to me, if you've got Jeffrey Epstein's secret tapes, which let me just interject. For those of you who haven't seen my documentary, Bringing Down Jeffrey Epstein, and those who haven't really been versed in all the Epstein lore, the mythology, if you will, Epstein is alleged to have had hidden cameras on his island where he was videotaping, the escapades of the rich and the famous and all the different people he was associated with, right? So we talked about that last year before anybody else, October 2018 at the Bringing Down Jeffrey Epstein documentary. Then it was reported in the affidavits of at least a couple of the women, and they did find, the police, when they raided his home, they found pinhole cameras inside clocks, but the alleged cameras that were recording everything, they claim they never found those. These tapes haven't been seen by anybody, allegedly, or at least they haven't publicly talked about it. But you have a hacker who claims that he was hired to do the encryption of the servers where Epstein was keeping these hidden cameras. And I just find it a little weird that he would let himself be seen. Like, if you know the guy, and for example, okay, now you would know the New York Times is reporting that somebody who is working on the encryption team has copies of the footage. And think about all the people who stand to be implicated, whether that's Trump, Epstein himself, the Israelis, Clintons, all kinds of people could be implicated with those tapes. And you're going to put a freaking silhouette of yourself out there on the New York Times, which they describe the dude. They even show a picture of him. It's pretty clear. Like, if you've seen this guy, if you knew him, or if you worked with him, you could probably pinpoint him out of a lineup, even from the back of his head. So I don't know. I just find that odd that if this guy really is who he says he is, he'd be willing to take some kind of chance like this. But let's get into this. This towering, barrel-chested, and wild-bearded man who loves to drink and wears flip-flops. It just sounds like some freaking Hollywood script. He goes by Patrick Kessler, he's using a fake name given the shadowy, dangerous world that he inhabits. And he basically told the lawyers, again, he went to David Bowie and he went to one of the lawyers associated with the Brad Edwards and Pottinger, I think is his name, that he had a vast archive of Epstein's data stored on encrypted servers overseas, and he claimed that he had video of some of the most powerful men in compromising sexual situations, even in the act of rape. So the reason this is interesting, again, whether this is just a Hollywood script for us to entertain ourselves with, or if this is fact, I'll leave that to you. But it is an interesting read nonetheless, because it details how, if it is true, it shows that the New York Times and David Bowie, one of the attorneys representing Virginia Giuffre and one of the other attorneys involved with representing the victims, have been secretly meeting with this alleged hacker who claims that he has the Epstein tapes. And the tapes, allegedly, he says, include Mr. Dershowitz. And we're going to get into that in a moment. But they won't, and this is the thing, is if this is real, what drives me crazy is the Times is still covering for the people that are accused, because they won't specifically say anybody's names. They say that Kessler had a list of potential targets, what he called the hot list. And this whole back and forth about whether Bowie and Pottinger were the lawyers who were, again, representing the victims, were going to try to extort the people who were on the videos. And it says basically they would use the supposed footage in litigation or try to reach deals with the men who appeared in it, with the money flowing into a charitable foundation. And they described hypothetical plans in which the lawyers would pocket up to 40% of the settlements and extract money from wealthy men by flipping from representing victims to representing their alleged abusers. And that is something that is seen as kind of unethical, but it's not unheard of, where a lawyer could build a big case up on one side and then fight with the attorney on the fight with the accused on the other side. So my point here is, it seems like they're kind of painting the attorneys in a shady light, where they're basically saying, like, these guys are claiming they're trying to help out the victims, but in reality they were meeting with some guy in secret trying to just extort money out of these wealthy folks. And also what that does is it kind of gives Dershowitz's story a little bit of credibility, because he's already said, see, look, they were meeting with the hacker and they were willing to try to extort some of us, based on these alleged secret videos. And the story, the Times here, will go down a little bit. It actually shows text messages between the apparent hacker and the lawyers. So, they're really doing their work here. So David Boies is the attorney right here on the left with Virginia Giuffre, and this is Mr. Pottinger right here, the other guy who was communicating with this hacker. So again, I recommend reading the whole thing yourself. But basically what it comes down to is they were texting each other, and for months he goes back and forth, and he's trying to get them to believe that he has stuff. They keep asking him to provide evidence, and they even say at one point they bring Sheldon Adelson in, who, if you don't know who he is, he's a very powerful Israeli advocate, you could say, a very powerful Jewish man, a billionaire, casino magnate in Las Vegas, founder of one of Israel's largest newspaper, and an enthusiastic booster of Netanyahu. They even say that they were going to get him involved in one way, that he might be interested in purchasing the tapes. For what purpose? I don't know, to keep them quiet. So it almost seems as if Boies and the New York Times, surprise, surprise, would be willing to cover this up if, obviously the Times is playing the role saying, if there's not a real story here, then we're not going to report on it. And the attorney is trying to find out if it's worth buying or if there's evidence he can use for his victims. But at the end of the day, let's imagine that the lawyers were able to strike a deal. And basically, he helps them extort the bad guys, whoever, Dershowitz and whoever else is on these tapes, but it never becomes public. So I don't know. I don't know how much we can even trust this David Boies guy, who's, I have been giving thought, and I'm just saying, I don't have any hard evidence of this, but I have given thought more recently of the fact that how much can we even trust the lawyers who are representing the women to really do deep, good work and not to misdirect the case. And I don't know. And even, and I dare say this, some of the women who are accusing Epstein, there's a lot of women who are out there, but only a few of them have come forward publicly and are kind of becoming the faces of that. And I think that's almost dangerous when that ends up happening, when you have one person supposed to represent a whole group of people. And, I don't know. So we just got to be careful here. But the things that I think are interesting is, again, they show the text messages. And right here, the Times, though, they're bleeping out certain initials. So right here, they have the initials for Andrew, or they have Andrew's name. AD is Alan Dershowitz, and then there's 3 other initials here that are mentioned in this text messages where they're saying, I want to pull any info about so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so, and those are basically gone. So they're still kind of hiding information, maybe because it could essentially just be gossip, and so they don't want us to know about it. But the interesting thing I think about it is, look, they show you, it says that at one point, Boies and Pottinger do meet with Kessler, and he told them his story and presented images of what he said were black and white blurry images of a man, a dark-haired man receiving oral sex, a prominent CEO, and he showed them other pictures and other images and things of that sort. And then eventually they even arranged for the New York Times to have a meeting with him. And they go into the whole Virginia Giuffre story. They go into Maria Farmer accusing them, talking about the pin-sized cameras. They do mention the police found 2 hidden cameras hidden in clocks, but they say no other cameras were found. If the surveillance system did exist, nothing that Kessler told or showed the Times proved that he had access to it. The photos he shared were too grainy to establish anyone's identity, and many of the other elements of his story failed to hold up under scrutiny. So they admit that they had seen the photos that what he insisted were photos related to, the pictures from the cameras. He also showed them supposed CIA documents that they claim they were able to find on Google. So they're trying to discredit this guy, whoever he really was. But I think the most interesting part is that they do say that the Times does eventually arrange where a group of journalists was going to meet with him. And this is all coming up into just the last week. This story took place all the way up until the middle of November. So this is just a few weeks old that they've been meeting with him since August, secretly with the lawyers and with the New York Times with this alleged hacker. And again, they try to paint the lawyers in a bad light, but the lawyers are basically saying, like, look, we're trying to do anything we can for our victims, and if that means we're going to talk with somebody then that is a hacker, then we're going to, do that and see if there's anything real to it. One of the lawyers says, I think he's full of shit. The other lawyer says, I really want to believe that he is who he says he is. But interestingly, and I think this is a key point to take away, is Dershowitz actually received a call from this alleged hacker. Kessler. He also says he records it. Kessler explained his Epstein story and that he no longer trusted Mr. Broze or Mr. Pottinger. That's the lawyers. The problem is that they don't want to move forward with any of these people legally, he says. They're just interested in trying to settle and take a cut. Dershowitz says, who are these people that you have on videotape? He says, there's a lot of people, naming a few powerful men. There's a long list of people that they want me to have that I don't have. Dershowitz asks, who? Did they ask about me? And the guy says, of course they ask about you. You know that, sir. And you don't have anything on me, right? Dershowitz asks. I do not know, Kessler said, because I never had sex with anybody, Dershowitz says. I mean, it all just seems like a little rehearsed and kind of like, oh, well, Dershowitz like, look, here, I had a phone call and I recorded it, and don't you see, this guy doesn't even have evidence on me. I mean, he even said that they were trying to extort me. Like, so, honestly, this whole thing could have been set up by fucking Alan Dershowitz in order to try to entrap these lawyers and feed them some nonsense, in order so he could turn around and do this and turn this whole New York Times story into, see, here's my evidence that these people were trying to extort people, because that's what's going to happen in court now. And the New York Times asked, what was the purpose of Kessler's phone call? Why did he tell Mr. Dershowitz that he wasn't on the supposed surveillance tapes after he had already told and showed David Bowie and Pottinger and the Times that he did, in fact, have video of Dershowitz? So if you believe the story, they're saying that he tells Dershowitz he doesn't have anything of him, but he had already told and shown lawyers in the Times that he did. Mr. Dershowitz said he didn't know why Kessler contacted him and that the phone call was the only time the men had talked. Then this is the real interesting part. The Times shows him one of the photos, the alleged still images from the videos, which is supposed to be Dershowitz, in which a bespectacled, excuse me, man, that means he's wearing some fucking glasses, resembling Dershowitz, appears to be having sex. Dershowitz laughed and said, that man wasn't him. His wife, Carolyn Cohen, peeked at the photo too. She says, you don't keep your glasses on when you're doing that. I'm like, what the heck does that even mean? So there's a guy that looks like maybe Dershowitz, and maybe you just can't see it that great, but he presents this and he says basically no, and his wife laughs it off. Maybe they're in denial, but it's just interesting because obviously the photos exist. Obviously the pictures do exist. And then here you go, in early October he contacted them and said he was ready to produce his footage. He got the Times and them all ready. He told them what time to meet him, and that they needed to use air-gapped computers and special thumb drives to transmit a code that would decrypt the files. And then at the last, he said, disaster struck, a fire was burning, the duplicate servers were destroyed, and one of his team members was missing and he was fleeing the country. Okay. Then 2 hours later, he gets in touch with the lawyers and tries to see if they can get money for him. So he's kind of going back and forth. And again, here's a picture of this guy, this apparent Kessler guy, the hacker. I don't know what to make of all this thing, but basically they're sort of acknowledging that the videos exist, but they won't say any of the other names of the people who are alleged to be in the videos. And they're basically trying, I don't know. I don't understand the purpose of this. I'm not going to sit here and try to act as if I got this one all figured out, guys. This is why I want to present it to you, because in light of all the Prince Andrew stuff coming out, Virginia Giuffre getting a lot of attention, and in light of Virginia Giuffre going after Dershowitz and these other cases, then you have this report that some hacker has the access to the Epstein files, the videotapes that we've all known have existed, and they're just showing the back of his head and side profiles of him and his hand and his face and bearded whatever on the New York Times. I don't know what to think, man. It's an interesting one. I'm sure that this is that we're seeing everything, the full picture here. That's just my take on it. I could be wrong. But I'd love to see what you guys think. I'm going to check up on the comments now. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Thank you again for following. If you haven't subbed, please sub. Do give a thumbs up. And, this is coming towards the end of 2019, the Conscious Resistance, and we've been doing reports on Jeffrey Epstein since 2015. I've been writing articles. We produced the documentary Bringing Down Jeffrey Epstein last year. So if you are thankful and appreciative of the reports that we've been doing, please subscribe, follow, support on Patreon, support on Subscribe Star, and however